needs a shoulder to cry on. Everyone needs a helping hand. Everyone needs someone to rely on. Yes, everyone needs a friend. So let's come together, celebrate each other, stand united as one. We lift our hands up and pray, lay all our love before Him with all of our faith. He is the change within us, there is a light. Let Him lead the way, lift our hands up and pray today.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing a highly requested video, which is a sourdough step-by-step video, how I make my sourdough, which for every person who does this video, it's gonna be different because everybody makes theirs a little differently, I found. So I took a couple different recipes when I started and kind of just tweaked them to what works best in the temperature of my house and my oven and our climate and all that. And so I'm gonna share with you how I make my sourdough start to finish. And I will also make one loaf a little extra special. We love an everything bagel loaf around here, especially to use for avocado toast in the mornings, which is just a stuffed loaf with cream cheese and then rolled in everything bagel seasoning, and it's really yummy. So my recipe makes 2 loaves, so I'll make one regular to show you the step-by-step, and then at the end I'll show you how I add in those additional ingredients to make some stuffed sourdough, because we really do like to experiment with some yummy stuffing of sourdoughs. We've got like garlic rosemary and jalapeno cheddar, that's a really yummy one. Any fresh herbs that go in your sourdough loaf, because you put it in the fridge for about 24 hours, it really just infuses it with a really good flavor. So first things first, the things that you will need for a standard sourdough recipe is active starter that's been fed, you know, within the last, I would say 6 to 12 hours or so. And then for the recipe that I use, which I believe my measurements originally came from Ballerina Farm. Her sourdough recipe, from what I can tell, is not currently available any longer. I believe she sells it as part of a cookbook now. But I think my measurements originally came from her, although they might not be the same, because like I said, I've kind of tweaked it along the way. Maybe mixed some of her stuff in with Farmhouse on Boone's. That's where I get the majority of my sourdough recipes. So you're gonna need filtered water. It's important that it's filtered water and not tap water, especially if you have chlorine in your tap. The starter, like I said, some unbleached flour. Some recipes call for bread flour. I just use an organic unbleached flour. And then you're gonna need some salt, which I may or may not have over here with me. I will grab that when it comes time. And then things like a tea towel and some various sourdough tools that I will show you as I get going here. So I'm gonna tie my hair back first of all, because that's always a problem for me. And because I'm doing this tutorial style, I'm starting it here in my living room or my dining room. But from here on out, I'll show you the step-by-step in my kitchen. I'll just give you a bird's eye view of the bowl. So like I said, start out with some filtered water. I just use 735 grams or so. I mean, it's like probably 745 according to my measurements right now. It's not exact. I get mine from my Berkey filter, but you can get it from, like, you know, distilled water, or if you have a good filter in your fridge or anything like that. To this, I'm going to add 250 grams of my recently fed starter. So I'm just gonna tear my scale here, and then, oh, that's another thing you'll need is a digital scale or something that measures grams. And so I'm gonna do about 250 grams of this. So I've got, oh, it went down to 240. So as soon as you have 250 grams of starter in your water, then you're gonna want to take, and I use this, I think it's like a Dutch, I think it's called a Dutch whisk. And you're just going to whisk that up until it looks really milky. And you wanting to get this starter really incorporated into the water before you add the flour in. So I like to just use this tool, get it all mixed together until it looks just like a glass of milk. Only takes a couple of minutes there, and there we go. So I don't know if you can see it, probably not, but that's what it looks like. Then I'm going to get my scale zeroed out again, and I'm going to add 1,000 grams of flour. I have all sorts of different measurements online, but this is what I found works best for me. So let me get this flour measured out. I like to use the same bowls, and I pretty much know that 1,000 grams looks like a certain level in this particular bowl. This is a metal bowl, and from what I've heard, it's best not to do sourdough in a metal bowl. I don't have a metal bowl large enough anyway, so I dump it into a ceramic bowl here. All right, we're almost there. All right, here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and dump this into this water and starter mixture. And then I'm just going to use the same whisk to incorporate it all until it looks shaggy. That's the phrase you'll hear online. It's just going to look shaggy. It's not perfectly incorporated, but you're getting the process started. Once it looks incorporated for the most part, and like all the flour is all mixed into the water, you're just going to throw a tea towel over it and let it sit for about 30 minutes. I'm going to go find where I stuck my salt, and we'll come back and I'll show you how I incorporate the salt and really start getting this whole thing going. All right, I'm happy with that. I'm gonna go ahead and throw a towel over this, and I'll see you back in half an hour. All right, we're back in action here. Let me just get y'all straight here. All right, there we go. So it has been about 30 minutes or so, and you won't see really much change from the initial little mix up till now. Nothing's grown, there will be no bubbles. That takes a couple of hours at least. I just use an espresso shot glass for this. We're gonna add some salt and some water again. So I will put this on my scale here, and we're gonna do I usually do about 25 grams of salt. All right, there we go. And I don't know if you can, yeah, you can see it there. I've got a light on here, but it says 25. And then what I do is I sprinkle this just all across the top. And then I should be back to 0 here on my scale. I'm gonna go ahead over to the Berkey. Yeah, 50 or so, okay. And then I'm gonna go ahead and dump this right over the top. And then take my wedding rings off for this next part. And then with clean hands, what you're gonna do is you are going to get this salt mixed into the dough, and then you're gonna start kneading it and folding it for, I don't know, a minute or two usually is what I do. I think you're supposed to do it for like 3 to 5 minutes. I usually just am doing this on the run in the kitchen while I'm cooking other things. So you're gonna start like this, really pushing that salt. I'm gonna try to come over here and do it from the side. Pushing that salt and water into the dough. And then I start pulling it and doing the same thing. Just getting it all kneaded together. And then you're gonna keep doing this for, like I said, a minute or two at least, until you can take a piece of this and kind of feel it and you don't feel any more salt between your fingers, which, like I said, takes just a little bit of time for that to all get incorporated. Sourdough can be a science or it can just be based on feeling, and what I've found is my loaves turn out best when I follow some of the rules and the structure of how to make a loaf loosely. You know, I follow it, but I put my own twist on it. When I relax a little bit, my loaves turn out better than when I'm so focused on precision and timing that the whole process in itself is not enjoyable. And I've learned that you learn your own starter. So you know over time what works best and what the best methods are in your home and with your recipe and at your temperatures and things like that. It took me a couple of months to get to that point from the time that I started my starter until I got a successful loaf that I could replicate every time. Once my starter was mature enough and consistent enough, I just took a little bit of time to, like I said, learn my own starter, figure out what methods I liked best, what recipes worked best for me, and I've never looked back. It's been all done by memory from that point on. And it is really enjoyable. I don't fuss too much with the rules, so I'm just kind of showing you what has worked best for me over the last, say, 6 months or so. So then, and actually when I first started and people would say things like, yeah, you don't have to focus so much on measuring, you don't have to focus so much on this, I was like, I will never get to the point where I just know, or like when people would feed their starters without actually measuring the grams, I'd be like, I don't think that's possible. I don't have it in me. I don't understand how that works. And now I am at that point where I have a big jar and I just throw some flour and water in, figure out the consistency I want it to be, and stick it back in the fridge. So it's really not as overwhelming as it seems at first, although at first it is quite a lot to learn. I've always enjoyed baking breads. I've milled my own wheat for years and made our own bread, but sourdough was a totally new learning curve. It was all new to me. It doesn't follow any of the rules that I'm used to with bread. So it was, you know, I feel like everybody is a beginner when it comes to sourdough. All right, so I'm gonna go wash my hands. I threw that on again and I'll be back in about 30 minutes to do some stretching and folding. Okie dokie, I forgot about this, which is normal. It's probably been about 30 minutes. Rings are off again and we're gonna start stretch and folds. And I do this 3 times or so until I let it sit for a few hours to ferment. So this is really simple and you'll see it go from like really like pliable to a little bit more firm. So I'm gonna move it right about there. Okay, so what I do is I start on one side and I just kind of pull it up and push it over. It's real sticky at first, but you'll see it changes here as we go on. Pull it up, tuck it in. Pull it up, tuck it in, and then, so I've done all 4 sides now, and then what I do is I do it again kind of with the corners. So pull it up, and see how it's not as stretchy anymore, it's getting a little bit more firm. It's kind of coming up as one whole bit now, and it's just getting some tension in there. And then by the time I get to this 4th corner here, it just kind of all lifts up together instead of stretching out. And then towel goes back on, hands get washed again, rings go back on again, and then I come back like 30 or 45 minutes later. All right, it is 30 minutes again. And this time it looks like it's growing just a touch. You can just kind of tell it's starting to get some action underneath there. I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing, just doing 4 corner, or the 4 sides and then 4 corners. And I'll do it one more time after this, and then I will let it sit for a few hours. See, it just depends on, really it just kind of depends on how hot it is in my house. When we had our air conditioning done, I made so much sourdough, so many sourdough things and baked goods in those couple of days that our AC was off, because my starter was just going absolutely crazy. My bread rose really quickly. It was so funny. So anyway, I'll go ahead and do this one more time, same exact process in about 30 minutes, and then I'll let it go until it's doubled in size. And like I said, that usually takes a couple of usually takes like maybe 4 hours or so this time of year. But sometimes when I don't have the time, say I started it really late in the evening, I'll stick it in the fridge and then pull it out the next morning and let it do that. But I have time tonight, so I'm gonna let that sit for 30 more minutes, do the stretch and folds one more time, and then let it sit for about 4 hours or so. All right, and final round here. You can actually start to see some bubbles forming. And it's much stretchier here. It's much more cohesive. It's not so sloppy. After I get this round done, I'm gonna go ahead and just put a tea towel on top of it and let it sit, like I said, for a few hours. Now you can put it in your oven with your oven light on. That helps keep it warm if you want to expedite the process at all. But I've found that it's just done best when it's left and you just kind of let it do its own thing and check on it every now and then until it gets to the point you want it to be at. Okay, we are back. It's been a few hours. It's actually bedtime around here, so you may hear some background noise. But before we shape the bread and fold it and all that, we're going to take our baskets and put some flour in. What I do usually is put a big scoop of flour in one of them and then kind of do this to get the flour all around it. Dump it into the second one, and then get the flour all through there, and then dump it onto my board so that those are ready. Now, I usually do this on my kitchen counter, but because I can't really film in there, it's not quite enough space, I'm gonna try to do it on this cutting board. So, things you're gonna need for this part are your proofing baskets with a cloth lining, and then you'll just need a bench scraper as well as some plastic bags because you'll put the dough into those baskets and then into bags and into the refrigerator. And then for the stuffed sourdough loaf, I'll show you that, the things you'll need for that in just a moment. So let's go ahead. I'll move this out of the way, show you how our bread is looking. So it's obviously risen quite a bit and it's not overproofed. It's very, I don't know what the word would be. It's like kind of wiggly here, but if it gets too overproofed, it gets really sloppy. So this is about where I like it to be. I wouldn't want it to go much longer than that. So we're just gonna take this and we're going to get it all out onto our board here and try to get as much out of the bowl as possible. All right, and this is always really difficult to clean up off of my when I do the dishes. Then we're gonna take our bench scraper and we're just gonna divide this dough right in half. All right, gonna put one half to the side here. I'm actually gonna put it back in the bowl right now to get it out of the way. And we're gonna work with this loaf. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we are going to stretch this out to be like, almost like a square rectangle. We're gonna fold one side over, and this is what the way I learned how to shape from Ballerina Farm, but like I said, there's lots of different ways, but this is the best way that I know how to make tension in the loaf. Then we're gonna roll it up from the bottom after we do the folds. Then you're going to build tension, and the way you build tension is by pushing your loaf away from you and then pulling it back. And it's obviously much easier if you don't have something that's gonna move like this. That's why I like doing this on my counter, but you'll notice it goes from being like wiggling around to becoming pretty firm. And it's something that when I was teaching my daughter how to do this, the best way I could describe it is you push and then you kind of like tuck, and when you pull it back. But you definitely just kind of need to get your hands on this in order to learn this method. It's really just playing around with it and then you get used to it. And actually, I almost have to do this one-handed to hold on to this cutting board, but you get the picture here. So you create tension in the loaf and then you let it rest for about 15 or 20 minutes. And you'll kind of start to see some of the bubbles that are in there, almost kind of revealing themselves. You see that right there. And I don't know if you can tell in the video just how much more firm this has now become. Now, we're gonna do the same shaping for the second loaf, but since we're stuffing the second loaf, I will show you what we're gonna do differently. Okay, so I've got my second loaf kind of in like a little bit of a square here. And what I'm gonna do for this everything bagel loaf is I'm gonna put some cubed cream cheese and just a little sprinkle of everything bagel seasoning on it before I do the folding and the rolling. And I only wanna use about half of what I have here because I'm going to do it again the second time when I shape it for the second time. So anything you want to put in a stuffed loaf, you do it at this point. This I learned from Acts of Sourdough on this particular combo. I learned from Acts of Sourdough on Instagram, and she has some really great recipes on there. So then I roll it up. And then I do the push and pull again. Now this has a little less flour on the board, so it's helping me build the tension a little bit more. I might need to get a little bit of flour on my hands. They're a little sticky. All right, here we go. All right, so now we're going to leave these two, and you see how much tension there is. We're gonna leave these for 20 minutes. Okay, it has been about 15 minutes, and so what we're gonna do is we are going to do a very similar thing with putting it into like a square and then creating tension, but we're gonna do it less aggressively. So instead of flattening it out fully, we're just gonna kinda do like that. We're gonna try to like not overdo it here. It's like when you're making regular bread, you can knead it a little more aggressively, but with sourdough, you kind of want to preserve what's happening here with the fermentation, the bubbles and all that. So we're just going to kind of do that. Roll it up. And then one more little bout of creating that tension. And then this time, instead of leaving it to sit at the end here, we're going to put it right into the basket. My favorite part is when you can like start to see some of the bubbles come up. It's very satisfying because you know that it's doing what it's supposed to do here. And once again, I'll say this is much easier on a counter, but it's impossible for me to show that in my counter. Okay, so it's pretty solid. So I'm going to take my bench scraper from underneath here and put it on in the basket. And then you just want to make sure that any seams are sealed up. And then we're going to put this into a plastic bag and into the fridge. But before I do, I'm going to go ahead and show you the process for this stuffed loaf. So similar, again, you just kind of stretch it out gently. I'm going to add some more of my stuffing here to this part. And when we do the building tension on this part, you'll notice that some of the cream cheese and stuff kind of pulls up from the bottom. All right. Okay, build some tension. All right. Then this time, before I transfer it into the basket, oh beautiful, that is just great. Okay, so before I transfer it into the basket, what I like to do is just kind of like dump some everything bagel seasoning on the counter or the board here. Take my scraper, kind of roll it around through here to coat the top. And then I'm gonna put it into the basket. And then just take a little bit more. Make sure that the edges around here have got a good bit. And then it's gonna look really pretty tomorrow when we bake it. Seal up those seams, and we're gonna go get this into the fridge. All right, so I just do a loose tie on the ends here. I don't double knot it or anything, just make sure it's covered. And if I have like a 2-gallon Ziploc bag, then I'll put it in there, or I just use grocery bags, whatever. And then stick it in the fridge, and I like to keep it in there at least 12 hours, but up to like 36 to 48 hours. I still get a pretty good bake on these. So I'm gonna stick these in the fridge tonight, and I will bake them off tomorrow afternoon. Okay, it is the next afternoon now, and I'm about to pull my bread out. It's been in the fridge, and one thing I didn't film was I took my Dutch oven with the lid on, and I put it in a cold oven, and then turned my oven on to 450 degrees and let the Dutch oven warm up with the actual oven. So because you want that to be preheated before you put your bread in. So that's still in the oven right now while I do this part. I just want it to be as hot as possible. So what I do is I take my parchment paper and I wrinkle it up because it helps things be a little bit more pliable. And then flatten it out. Then I'm going to take my basket out and hopefully this is my regular loaf and not my everything bagel loaf because it's going to be easier to see. Yes, okay. So I just plop it out like that. And then what I'm going to do is just sprinkle a little flour on top. All right, so when I do my scoring, I do a few little deeper cuts for design. This is just a, oh, what's it called? I can't remember what this razor is called, but I will link it down below, all the tools that I use. Or you could just use a razor blade if you have one. And I just like doing these little wheat stalk designs. They always turn out really cute when you bake the bread. So a few of these, but what is really actually the beneficial thing, this is kind of just more like the therapeutic, rewarding part of the bread baking process. But what the actual helpful thing is this larger cut. And that is just gonna help the bread rise a little bit more so it doesn't split in a random place. I've noticed that when I do a deeper cut, my bread is not as dense because it gives it more room to grow in the oven. And so I do one cut like that, and then I come back a second later and do a second cut in the same spot. And it really just, I don't think I can really show you, but it really gives it, like, you can tell there's like a second layer that happens when you do that. I'm gonna just do a couple more of those little wheat designs over here. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to go get my, I'm actually just move this out of the way to show you this part. Okay, I'm gonna go get my Dutch oven. Okay, well loved. And then what I do is I lower my bread in, and then I take a little bit of water, dump it in to create a little steam in there, and then I just put the lid right on top, and I'm gonna put that in my oven at 450 for 28 minutes or so. All right, so it's been about 28 minutes or so, and I'm just gonna pull that lid off. It's looking real good. I'm gonna put it back in for 10. The baby was really fussy, so I don't know if you could hear me, but after that first 25 to 28 minutes, you pull the lid off and put it back in for 10 more minutes, and that really helps it get all crispy and brown on top. Okay, it just came out of the oven, and I'm going to get this right onto the counter, but I need 2 hands. All right, there we go. Oh my gracious, it smells great. It looks great. It did this great, I believe it's called an ear, which John's like, don't say that. He hates whenever I'm like, look at the ear. But it looks wonderful. The design's cute on it. And then it's real nice and crispy, which I love. So I'm gonna let this cool down. I'm gonna put my Dutch oven back in the oven because I'm gonna go ahead and do my second loaf right now. So I want everything to stay nice and hot. Usually I do not bake 2 loaves at a time. Typically I'll bake 1 loaf after like 12 hours in the fridge, and then I'll leave the other one in there until the next night to bake for breakfast the next morning, or leave it until the next morning to use for dinner a second day in a row. Because what you don't want to do is slice it while it's hot. It's just better to give it a little bit of time to cool down. And so if you can, John and I have both been known to take a knife to it pretty quickly after it's done. But we're using this for dinner tonight in a couple hours. I'm gonna roast up some garlic and spread it on for some garlic bread with a salad. And so I'm gonna let this cool for a couple hours before I slice it. I'm gonna cook, like I said, that second loaf today because I'll let it cool down, and then we will use that for avocado toast for breakfast tomorrow. So let me go ahead and get the Dutch oven back in the oven and then show you how I do the stuff. Here we go, second loaf. And now this one, what I'm not gonna do is put flour around the top because, you know, the seeds and all that. I'm not even really gonna do a design in this one. I'm just gonna come in and do a nice, well, should I try something different? Sometimes, or mostly I just do that nice big slice on the top, but it's also fun to do like a square design or a crisscross. Maybe I'll do that just for funsies here. I'll do a nice deep score down the center here, and then do a cross across the top. When I'm doing like a bacon, no, not bacon, cheddar jalapeno loaf. Sorry, cocoa melon is melting my brain over here. Then I'll also put a couple of slices of the jalapeno, fresh jalapeno, and a little bit of cheddar on top instead of much of a design. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing I did before, where love you. Love you. Where I, oh, love you. Put this in here. Yeah. Put a little water in. Seal it up, and it's going in the oven for 25 to 28 minutes before that lid is going to come off for 10 additional minutes. All right, it's been 26 or 27 minutes, and it's looking good over here. Oh, look at that little cream cheese buddy that came up to the top. Looking real good. Gonna put it back in. Final 10 minutes to brown up and crisp up. All right, another loaf out. I love this little sneaky piece of cheese that bubbled up to the top. It looks pretty and yummy, and I'm looking forward to breakfast tomorrow. Okay, here we go. Now, like I said, I will slice up the regular loaf this evening for some garlic bread to go on the side with our salads for dinner. I'm just gonna roast up some garlic and spread it on like some garlic toast. And then this one we will have tomorrow with avocados for breakfast. The kids really like avocado toast on this. And the cream cheese in the middle, some of it sticks together, a lot of it kind of melts, and it just gives a really good flavor. So it doesn't necessarily stay like a stuffed loaf where there's like bits of cream cheese. It more so just adds a nice flavor to it. So it's really good, and this turned out beautiful. Okay, this is the last tool that I'll recommend to you, and this is a bread bow. So you can use any good knife to cut sourdough, but I will admit this bread bow makes all the difference, and I will link it down below.
Everyone needs somebody to lean on. Everyone needs someone who cares. If we come together as one, help each other get stronger. We are bound in the name of the Lord. So let's come together, celebrate each other, stand united as one. We lift our hands up and pray, lay all our love before Him with all of our faith. He is the change within us, there is a light, let Him lead the way. Lift our hands up and pray today. Oh, pray. Oh, pray. Oh, pray. Oh, pray. So let's come